What's going on, guys? This is Ryan with RK Outpost. Today I want to talk to you about one of the more interesting and one of my favorite series in the entire expanded universe, and one that really changed the way that I looked at it when I read it, and what made me realize that I was really going to spend a lot of time invested in this universe that George Lucas created. And that's the X-Wing Rogue Squadron series, specifically the Rogue Squadron, which is the first 4 books. Because those are the first ones I read right after the Thrawn trilogy. If you've seen my video on how I recommend you get started in the expanded universe, that's actually what I suggest is, going ahead and reading the Thrawn trilogy first, and then coming back and reading some others in order. Because I think the Thrawn trilogy is a good way to get started. But the X-Wing series is different than a lot of other books in the expanded universe. Because if you were to ask someone, what do you think Star Wars is? The first thing they would probably say is lightsabers and the Force. And then maybe they'd say space battles. Well, Rogue Squadron is based nearly entirely on the aspect of space battles. Like you would imagine, it focuses on Rogue Squadron, a squadron of X-Wing pilots. And it has to deal with, obviously, space combat, military action, and a little bit of kind of just the politics too. But let me set the stage for you when it takes place, a couple years after Return of the Jedi. So the Empire's been defeated at Endor, and they're kind of scrambling. There's a big power vacuum up top after the Emperor's been defeated. Vader's gone. So it's a struggle for the Empire to you have a lot of the Moffs want to take control, and this Admiral wants to take control. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, and they're giving up a lot of ground. What was the rebellion has now become the New Republic, and they're trying to establish a government themselves and having a tough time. Before all they had to deal with was staying alive. Now they're trying to start a new government from scratch. So it's interesting to kind of watch that play out. And it focuses around, initially, Wedge Antilles, who is someone you should be familiar with if you've watched the original trilogy. He's actually in episode 4, 5, and 6. He isn't necessarily, he doesn't play a key role per se. I mean, he does do important things. He's, the only person to have survived 2 Death Star runs. It's pretty impressive. But, he's not a very important character in the saga. Well, he becomes a very important character in the X-Wing books. And he has an incredible character because he's obviously an ace pilot. He's obviously a skilled pilot, but he also has this very unique leadership style that you see develop throughout. So we get to learn a lot more about Wedge than we ever knew before. And along with that, we get introduced to other characters like Gavin Darklighter and Tycho Selchu and Karan Horn. Especially Karan Horn. He is one of my favorite characters in all of Expanded Universe lore, and I am going to dedicate a video specifically to him some point. Not sure if it'll be on this channel or on Geeks and Gamers, but I need to do a Karan Horn video because he's awesome. But we get all these characters that are going to be so important in things to come. This group of individuals that was built by Michael Stackpole when he wrote these just became... So many of them became so important in what was to happen over the next 25 years, or I guess about 20 years of writing stories. And we also have a very intriguing villain and a very capable villain who happens to be female. Imagine that. In the mid-90s, there were strong female villains in Star Wars, multiple strong female villains. Not that it matters that they're female, it's just interesting because you wouldn't think the way they market some of the newer stuff that was the case, but it definitely was. Ysanna Sard is brutal and very capable, and she's the director of military intelligence who essentially took over on Coruscant after the Emperor died. And she's built this, this web, and she is in charge of Coruscant. She does not want to let it go. Well, you think. And obviously the New Republic, to send a message, is very intent on getting their hands on Coruscant, kicking the Empire out, and sending a message to the rest of the galaxy that the New Republic is ready for this, that they care about you and they want to be the ones in charge. It's also kind of interesting because it's the first time in a book The first book, Rogue Squadron, was the first one that was written where Luke, Han, or Leia were not in it at all. They're not a focus point. It's not the point of it. You know, they do make a couple appearances a little later on. Leia's doing a couple things with the New Republic government. Luke comes in for a second one time, but for the most part, they're non-existent because this is the story of Rogue Squadron. And like I said before, it was when I realized, you know, now reading this books that I had characters that I had no I had no notion of like care for them at all before I read them. And I read them, I just could not put it down because it was so good. It really drew me in, and it's when I realized that this universe that George Lucas built had so much more to offer than just the movies and the characters from the movies, as much as I do love them. And so it was really a turning point for me when I realized I want to get my hands on everything I could, regardless of if Luke Skywalker was on the cover of it or not. And the author, Michael A. Stackpool, the way he went about creating this series is he basically wanted kind of a Top Gun in space feel to it with the pilots. And so he went and interviewed a bunch of former and current pilots, you know, from back in World War II, Vietnam, etc. And I didn't hear about this till recently. It was very interesting when I found out about it. But that's how he developed a lot of the different characters. For instance, Wedge, who is, you know, the squadron commander. He's the leader of Rogue Squadron. He is very hesitant to get too close to the rest of the members of Rogue Squadron. And one of the reasons for that is when Michael Stackpool was interviewing people, he ran into an old pilot who said, I used to never even get to know their names. I'd never get to know these people until they came back from 3 missions. Because if you've been on 3 missions, you're more likely to succeed. So he had lost so many people that it wasn't even worth bothering for him to get close to them until they'd passed 3 missions. And you see that from Wedge, who's the same way. He tries to keep his people at arm's length because in this war against the Empire, he has lost so many people that he's trying to isolate himself from it. It's tough for him to do because he's a caring person, but he's trying. And it was a little different than things that I had read before. It was a little darker and grittier. And they really wanted to put off this perception that what they were doing was not easy and that people didn't always come back. So you'd have characters that they would develop right along with all these other main characters, and you didn't know when, but all of a sudden during a mission they wouldn't make it back. And so you're trying to deal with this character you got attached to just out in a blink of an eye, along with the characters. You're reading about them having to deal with it too. And it's just it was just something different that I enjoyed. It was before the New Jedi Order came about and we really had that plot armor broken for some of our main characters. So it was something I hadn't really experienced before, and I really enjoyed it. So to me, this book series was just a very important part in developing my fandom for Star Wars and the expanded universe. So if you're thinking about getting into it, don't hesitate. Jump right into it. The X-Wing books are fantastic. What do you guys think? Are you interested in reading more about the X-Wing Rogue Squadron series? Have you read it before and you already love it? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, and I'll talk to you guys later.